Welcome to Wellthy Living Conversations. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wellthy Living. It's here that I connect with a variety of wonderful people to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. So in today's episode, I'm speaking with a very special woman, Amy Loughren.
So it's pronounced Loughren.
Loughren. Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. I should have asked you that before I did.
No, that's okay. Everyone has their own little twist on my name.
So Amy worked for many years as an overloaded trauma ICU ER nurse, but in 2003, her life path changed. You may know Amy's story from watching the recent Netflix movie, The GoodNurse, that's based on part of Amy's life of her unknowingly befriending a serial killer, Charlie Cullen, in 2001, and she worked alongside him, with both of them being nurses. So Amy's now a clinical hypnotherapist and meditation instructor, among so many other spiritual healing modalities. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. And, I so appreciate juggling the time zones and being able to have this conversation. It's so wonderful, and your story is so fascinating, and obviously a lot of people got to learn a lot about you and your journey, and got taken on that emotional ride when they watched the Netflix movie, and some might have watched the documentary as well. So maybe in summary, can you share what took place between 2001 when you met Charlie and 2003 when you helped him be put behind bars? So take us through your friendship, your vulnerability, the betrayal.
Well, Charlie Cullen was an excellent nurse. He started working at the hospital where I was a travel nurse. And when we first met, it was just that immediate kind of bond where we trusted each other. We had each other's backs. We were clinically on the same level. I love brilliant people. I also love very shy people. And Charlie was both. And I really kind of looked at him as a mentor. He was a really good teacher. He was a good communicator. And he was also very funny. So he laughed at all my jokes, which immediately made him one of my best friends. And we actually changed our schedules a little bit so that we could work together as much as possible. And during that time, I was a single mom, and I was very, very sick. I had been diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, and I was struggling physically, but if I didn't work, I was going to lose my health insurance. And Charlie was one of the only people that knew that.
And so you developed this really beautiful, what you felt was this authentic relationship, which in a lot of ways, I'm sure it was. And you got really close. There was an obvious emotion between you of true friendship, and he helped you out as a single mother, and it just seemed in some ways a little bit too good to be true. And I suppose in a lot of ways it was.
Yeah, it was. When you work in nursing and when you work in medicine, when you're together, sometimes for 16 hours at a time, you're trauma bonding. And we worked night shift, which means we really didn't have much of a social life. And healthy or not, nurses end up really making their job their social life, because it's very hard to juggle everything, being able to sleep, being able to, like with me, being a mom. I would go to work, and sometimes it was the only time that I was awake and coherent. But yes, we had gotten extremely close, and Christy, I think, did a great job with making it understandable for people, that closeness. He never met my children. He did talk to my oldest daughter on the phone when we were going through an investigation, but he was never in my home. Now, that being said, he would have been in my home if we had lived close to each other. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So he was my everyday friend. He, we talked a lot, and he was one of the only ones that really knew what was going on in my life. And then this wonderful nurse ended up getting fired. And it was kind of out of the blue. It made everyone pretty much terrified, because if Charlie could be fired, then that meant all of us could be fired. We didn't really understand. I talked to Charlie after he was fired, and he told me that the reason he was fired is because he had not been honest on his application. And that was true. He hadn't. He lied about being fired from his previous job. But it still didn't make any sense why he would have been fired. About 2 weeks after he was fired, I think it was 2 weeks, detectives started showing up and asking some pretty leading questions. But I really thought it probably had something to do with narcotics. It didn't really occur to me that it was going to be a murder investigation. I had been a nurse for 16 years at that time. The only time that any of us had ever been questioned about anything was if narcotics ended up being taken from the nursing med unit. And so that was the only thing that I could imagine.
Wow. And, yep, go on.
And then I started to hear rumors that people had been questioned about certain patients that had died. And those patients apparently had died of strange circumstances. We had been dealing with a lot of problems with the lab, and many of us thought that there was something wrong with the lab. We did not realize that all of our lab results were skewed, because someone was literally overdosing patients every single day, every single shift. One or more of our patients was being overdosed with all kinds of different medications. But the detectives finally talked to me. Danny Baldwin, who was the lead detective, was the only one that would speak to me, and he made it very clear that he didn't want anyone else talking to me, because I was the only person that was still very close to Charlie. So in our meeting, we were supposed to have a hospital representative with us, and that hospital representative left the room while Danny was questioning me. And during this questioning, I was very, very hostile. And I told him that this was just a witch hunt. It was bullshit. And he was not going to get anything from me. And in fact, he showed me some evidence during that meeting when my representative left the room. It became evident that something sinister was happening from the piece of paper that he gave me, which were printouts from Charlie's activity on the Pyxis machine, which is a medication dispensing machine. And it also became apparent that the hospital had to have known what was going on. So between the fact that I just realized that one of my best friends, one of my closest friends, is probably harming patients, I also was terrified, because I knew in that moment that the hospital knew. And if they didn't know, that wasn't any better, because it was so evident that Charlie was doing something sinister from that printout, that anyone that knew how the Pyxis worked would know, because he wasn't hiding it.
So when you were sitting in that room, I mean, there's a few things that, you know, especially now going on more of that spiritual path and spiritual healing stuff where you've got to go and go, well, things happen beyond, you know, sometimes not just a coincidence. There must be looking back and going, isn't it strange that I'm the only one, the one that's closest to him, and the administration gets called out of the room at that particular time. So, you know, that must in itself be, wow, that's, how did that all happen as a coincidence, you know, for you to be him to be able to show you that paperwork because she left the room. So that must have been quite strange to
And
look back on.
also the fact, Lisa, that Charlie lived in Pennsylvania.
Mm,
I lived in New York. I was 4 hours from that hospital. Charlie was well over an hour, I think an hour, hour and a half to that hospital. The odds of us ever meeting, let alone the odds of us working together, the statistics are astronomical
mm.
against us ever having met. So there were a lot of divine synchronicities at play there, a lot.
Wow. And I mean, you mentioned the word trauma bond before. So obviously, are you thinking that in some way your relationship was that trauma bond, and you both had a lot of growth and lessons to learn from that experience? Like it was meant, I mean, nothing like that is, I suppose, meant to be, but there's always obviously opportunities. But how did that feel? Like, I mean, just hearing, were you shocked straight away? What went through you? Take me on a little bit of that journey, because it's just mind blowing to
Well,
even consider being
something
in that experience.
something had occurred before that. So all of this was in October of 2003. February of 2003, I collapsed at work, and I ended up with a pacemaker. I ended up with having to have several procedures, and was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy. Um, the night before I went in for those procedures and for my pacemaker, I dropped both of my daughters off at a friend's house, and I was then flying to Ohio, to Cleveland, to talk about getting these procedures done. And I dropped them off. I wanted them to see my face as being very happy, very excited. I wanted it to be a moment in time that if I did not survive, I wanted their last memory of me to be happy, and I wanted that burned into their memory of how much I loved them, and that was it. So I left. I was excited. I'm so happy that you're going to be hanging out at your friend's house. And I drove out of the driveway and just lost it, just started doing the absolute ugly cry. And I said, okay, universe, God, whatever you are, whatever this is, whatever this energy is in the universe, if this really is my wake up call, that I am not paying attention to what my life is supposed to be, then wake me up. I'm awake. I will listen. Shake me. I was doing the bargaining phase, but I meant it. I meant that I would stay awake and that I would pay attention and I would follow whatever I was supposed to be doing. And I did survive, obviously. And that day, when he showed me that paperwork, that is what went through my mind.
Wow,
That
I'm
moment
getting
went through my
goosebumps.
mind because I was like, holy shit. Like this is not a little thing. This is my moment. And the procedures that I did have, my pacemaker, everything that I did have had not worked. I was going to have to go on the transplant list. So I was like on my way out. I had been given a very, very poor prognosis. And so when the detectives asked me to help them, my instinct was absolutely not. I'm not putting my life on the line right now. I can barely make it to work. I can barely be a mom. I am not going to put myself through this kind of stress. And then I remembered that moment and I said, well, if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, I just have to follow it. I have to follow this. I am being given an opportunity. I need to follow this.
Yeah. Amazing. You had so much to lose, like you said, your career and your family and your health, and yet that whisper that says, do it anyway, risk it all, do it anyway. This is the message.
Yeah.
Wow. So did you have when that came, was there a sense of grace and ease through that, or was there a whole lot of mind chatter and no and yes and inner critic and you can do this, no, you can't do this, and there's fear? Or was there just this courageous confidence that you knew you had to take the inspired action?
I absolutely knew that I had to be a part of it. I had so much anxiety about it though. Like I couldn't sleep. I was having a hard time eating. I was having so much anxiety because I I was actually extremely concerned about losing my job. I was also so sad because I had just lost this support system at work. I didn't know if I could do this without my partner because he was helping me.
Mm.
And I really had someone to rely on. And now all of a sudden I'm completely alone.
Mm.
And I was terrified every minute, but there was never a moment where I thought I can't do this. I just thought, how am I going to help the detectives? How am I going to find a way to still be a mom and also protect myself from the hospital? Because it wasn't just that I was worried that Charles Cullen may be actually murdering people outside the hospital, because we didn't know.
Mm.
I knew that he had been arrested for stalking, and we weren't certain if my actual life, that my life and my daughter's lives were not at risk.
Mm. And so did you speak to your daughters about it before making the decision?
So the detectives came to see me at my house and showed me a lot more evidence. During the time that they were in my home, I received a call from that representative from the hospital, and she was trying to scare me into not talking to the detectives. She obviously didn't know that they were there at the time, but she tried to encourage me to not speak to the detectives unless she was in the room, because it could put me at risk. Like she was really concerned about me. Um, so yes, after I spoke with the detectives and saw a lot more of the evidence, I also realized that this could affect my daughter's life. I was the drama teacher at her school. I was directing the 6th grade play, and she was very, very shy. She was almost 12 years old at that time. And all of a sudden she has all of these friends. They're coming to the house. She's being invited, even though she always did have friends, but it was a life-changing opportunity for her to be more social and come out of her shell. And so I explained to her that I wanted to help detectives possibly stop a murderer. And I said I didn't know how this was going to play out. I didn't know if there were going to be terrible rumors about me. I didn't know if there were going to be people who believed that I actually helped him. I didn't know what the investigation was going to ask me to do. And we lived in a very small town. And I said, maybe you aren't going to be able to have your friends over anymore. Maybe I won't be able to direct the play. And maybe we'll even have to move. And those were worst case scenarios. But maybe nobody would find out. But if they did, it could go south pretty quickly. And she said, Mom, he's murdering people. I don't care about my social life. We have to help the detectives. I just thought, here I am, like explaining, like deeply explaining to her. And she was just like, why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah.
Of course we're going to help the detectives.
Yep.
So her moral compass was so intact and in line, completely in alignment. Whereas the people at the hospital, the bureaucrats, they had sold their souls for capitalism.
Isn't that interesting, isn't it? Like this 11-year-old daughter has more moral
Yes.
attitude than like the responsibility, someone who's responsible for hospital risks to patients.
Yes.
But it is interesting, isn't it? Because they're at an age where they're not really exposed to all of the other things that are going on with the world and all the different decisions. They're just like innocent and out the mouth of
Yes.
babes. But that just
Yes.
shows how important it is to be connected to our values. And at that age, it seems so much easier. And as we get older, we seem to disconnect to the values because we're so busy, we're so overloaded with so much going on that sometimes it's really hard to stop and go, what is actually most important?
Yes.
And for you, that must be part of this incredible journey of coming back and really connecting to your values, because making that values-based decision right then for you must have been so hard. You had so much to lose on just the career and the life of your family and and your health and your stress, but you also developed this really strong relationship with someone you seemed to have a lot of love for, and now you were in a way betraying, even though he had just completely betrayed you, but he wouldn't have seen it like that because he wasn't doing it directly to you, even though he was,
And when you care about someone in that way, your initial instinct is to protect them, at least for me.
Yeah,
I wanted
absolutely.
to protect Charlie. And yet, I also knew if he's hurting people, there is something so deeply wrong with him that he was hiding this. And just, my gosh, I held secrets. I had had a very, very challenging childhood. And when you hold on to those type of secrets, it just causes this intensity of shame and just weirdness about boundaries. So I was thinking about how he was a child once. He was hurt once. And I didn't have anyone to protect me. So my initial instinct was to help him. And I had to really pull myself away from that initial instinct and say, this is a person who, yes, I care for him. And I know that he has this darkness, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to hold him accountable. And I think that is also where my own boundaries changed, because my family protected my abuser. My family, who should have been protecting me as a young child, protected the idea of family. And it was very similar to the way that the hospital was protecting itself. And it reminded me of that same dynamic of how can they possibly not protect the patients who are the most vulnerable? That's it. It's their job. And what I realized is that the actual abuse, the actual murders are not the sickness. It's the denial that is the true sickness of all of this. Denial is the sickness that is in families. You can kind of get through everything when you bring things to light, but it's that denial, that pushing down, that that changing of reality, telling people that no, this didn't happen. That's the sickness. That's the illness. That's the darkness. And that's where I went up against the hospital. That's where I went up against myself and challenged myself with knowing that this person, I can still care for this person and hold them accountable. And that's where my family went wrong. They could still care for that person, but he needed to be held accountable, and they didn't do that. And now I had an opportunity to do that, and I was going to do it.
Wow, there's so much in that. It's amazing. And isn't that so much of the challenge that so many humans have, isn't it? That how do you balance still caring and loving and being compassionate and kind, because that's what people ultimately want to be, and still have boundaries and still hold someone accountable. Yeah. And it is such a tough balance I know for me, I found that balance tough. Most people would say at some point that they find that balance tough because it takes also so much courage, and you have to overcome the fear. And there's always going to be a fear of consequence, and we don't know what the consequence is, but it sounds to me that you're able to find some place within yourself where you were giving him a sense of freedom, which was your love and care and kindness to him by getting him to speak and release.
Yeah, Lisa, and that really is what all of this is about. Is I was so grateful for the way they portrayed Amy the character and Charlie the character on screen, because I could then see it in front of myself. I knew these concepts, I knew what I had done, but to see it concretely out there right in front of me, I was able to then give myself that, just feeling proud of myself for taking those steps. I didn't feel proud of myself at the time. I felt like I had betrayed my friend. I felt like I had done something wrong. And I know that it was attached to that feeling of me being the person in my family who said, no, this is wrong, and then being punished for it. It was very similar to that. And all of that weird guilt and shame that was tied up in all of it, and then having to keep it a secret. Everything that I did with the detectives, I had to keep that a secret. I couldn't talk about it. So once again, here I am holding on to this secret. And instead of burying all of that, I decided to go on this intense spiritual journey to figure out why I chose this part, this journey, this particular theme in my life to heal, to discover. And when I went on that journey, initially, I really felt like I wanted to heal something within myself. And then I realized that there wasn't anything to heal. It was a discovery of becoming aware. It was a discovery of understanding that we're allowed to have compassion for anything in this world, for any situation in this world, and yet still hold people accountable, still have boundaries, still love them. And it doesn't have to be and or. We don't have to look at people like they are monsters. We look at them, for me, for my particular journey, it's looking at them as they're on that similar journey. They are also on that journey of becoming aware. And who am I to judge the way that they have chosen to take this journey?
So incredible. I mean, you're such an incredible woman to recognize those things. It's huge. It's huge. And you were able to sort it out in your head to feel like it's okay, even though it was hard, even though it was scary. You were able to take the risk and do it anyway, and feel those uncomfortable feelings, which so many people aren't. And then within it, break that, I suppose, intergenerational trauma. Like you were and you've got daughters who now can look at all that, and they don't have to go, hopefully, through those. They'll go through different journeys of things that they have to rectify. But that one is broken now.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It is.
So how did you were betrayed by your friend. Then you took on that feeling, then you took on that, like, and owned it, like you were the one who was betraying. Did you ever see it and fear that the detective was going to betray you? Like you just were so trusting still after this whole situation where you believed and trusted and gave your all, and you see stuff and then you trust it again.
I have to say I didn't care.
Yeah.
I know that sounds odd, but I wasn't really concerned about the what if. What if the detectives are actually trying to set me up? What if, and people have asked me that, and I just didn't care. It didn't matter to me whether I trusted them or not, because we were a team. We were a team, and we were going to put Charlie Cullen behind bars. I felt close enough to Danny Baldwin and Tim Braun, the detectives on the case, that they showed me over and over again that they were trying to protect me. But I also knew that they were going to do the right thing. And the fact is, they're detectives. What if they did find out that, what if there was something behind the scenes with me and Charlie? Of course, they were going to have to do something to try and discover that. That was their job. So trusting, I don't look at trust in the same way that I used to. And I don't think that I look at trust in the same way that other people do anymore. Because to me, it has nothing to do with the other person. It has nothing to do with whether a person is going to do something to me. I look at literally every situation as, why did I call this to me in this particular journey for me to figure this out and to just experience it? I have my belief system, and it has been through not just Reiki and reconnective healing and timeline quantum jumping. I have also, done other things to really try and discover something deeper within the universe. And one thing is that I have studied and read thousands of near-death experiences. And a common theme is that this is a playground. This is an adventure. This is here not necessarily to learn, literally to experience. And I called it to me to experience being a serial killer's not just friend, but a serial killer's confidant, and also the person who gets to say, I put a serial killer behind bars. And that's pretty freaking cool.
Mm.
I mean, it's kind of cool.
Mm.
And I'm grateful for that experience.
Yeah.
I also know how hard that is for people to hear when they have gone through very traumatic things. Um, People don't want to say that they've called certain circumstances to themselves. And I understand that, because it's hard to say that someone else's experience that could be so intensely traumatic, that they have to take responsibility for that. They see it as life happening to them. I know that I did. I know that there were many times in my life where I said, why me?
Mm.
And I don't want people to feel that I am looking at them as if they deserve to have some type of traumatic thing happen to them, because that gets all misconstrued. That gets all tangled up with other people's experiences. And I can just tell you that my journey, the way that I understand things, the way that I'm processing things through studying Buddhism, through studying near-death experiences, through studying quantum physics, it's the way that I am processing it. It doesn't mean that other people need to process it the same way that I do.
Mm.
People are going to be on their own journey. If they believe that something happened to them, like for instance, for me with my cardiomyopathy, I don't know why something like that would happen, except to have that experience. There's no other reason. And there doesn't have to be a reason. There doesn't have to be this God that says you're being punished. There doesn't have to be a true spiritual reason for it either. It is just that this particular light being that is riding in this body is now experiencing something that is called cardiomyopathy and what that means. So that's my belief system. I have gotten to this belief system because of things that I have experienced, but others don't have to believe or see things the way that I do in order to enjoy their lives. I think that's where a lot of spiritual healers and spiritual teachers tend to go a little sideways, because they believe that because a certain modality has helped them, that it means that that particular modality is right for other people. And it's just not true. People will be on their own journey to find whatever is right for them. And I found that with some spiritual teachers that I had worked with, that they became so entrenched in their particular modality that they couldn't see beyond their modality.
Yeah.
I know I got kind of off on a tangent. I just know how painful it was for me when people would say things like it was meant to be.
Mm.
Well, what does that mean? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
So,
and I think that that's really important to clarify all that. And thank you for sharing and going off on that, whatever tangent you think you call that. But I don't think that it's a tangent, because I think it's really relevant and it's important, because these are big things that are life-changing experiences. And when trauma seems to be attached to the life-changing experience, which it most generally is, there's a particular event that takes place that then changes the pathway. If it's a not great, very, I suppose, let's say, traumatizing event, and someone at that time says, oh, well, it's just meant to be. I mean, it's not helpful. It's not a helpful thing to say. And it is, especially as somebody is going through that experience.
Yeah.
And you're right. A lot of people within the spiritual teachers or similar do often say things like that. And whether there may or may not be any truth, or maybe it could be worded differently, it's just not helpful. And people have to come to those things. I mean, you talk about belief systems. I think, they progress as we process, as we experience. And for me, in this particular moment, at this particular time, my belief is not necessarily in the thing that it happens for a reason. It's meant to be. It's more about things. All right, it happened. This was a part of my life experience. In every event that happens, there's learning opportunities. There's ways to develop my personal growth. There's ways to process it and think about, what has that said about me? What has that said about my way of relating? What is that, where's the dynamics? What can I learn from it? What can I take forward? Where do I need to improve? Where did I do well? And a lot of reflection can happen from really difficult times. But was that time meant to be? Well, maybe not. I mean, you can say everything is meant to be. Everything is as it's supposed to be. But, that's just up to a person's interpretation. But to say that, you're right, it's not helpful.
I also have reflected recently on healing. And I think we have become, as a society, as a culture, very focused on healing trauma. And yet, to me, saying that you're healing something, and I understand that it's seen as a wound, a mental wound. I think it's more about progressing rather than it is about healing, because we're not broken. It's as if we need these diagnoses now to be able to explain behaviors. And so many people have been asking me what I believe Charlie Cullen's diagnosis is. And I understand wanting to have those types of answers. I also think that when people become confused about the way that they think or the way that they are perceiving things, they want a title to go along with that so that they can say, oh, well, this is why I have this behavior, rather than taking responsibility for the behavior and saying, okay, is this a behavior that causes me stress? Or is this a behavior that causes me joy? And now, do I know how to live with this behavior? Or can I find another behavior to possibly give me more joy? Yeah. And the fact is, we don't have to heal to be good citizens. We don't have to heal to be good people. We don't have to heal to enjoy life. And that journey for me was something that was hard to learn. I didn't have to heal my trauma. What I did need to understand was that type of trauma for me molded me in a way that I could love a serial killer. And it was that love that put him behind bars. So this trauma, this horrific thing that happened to me as a child, was actually the thing that saved possibly another hundreds of people. And if I hadn't had that trauma, I wouldn't have been able to relate to someone like Charlie Cullen. So I'm kind of glad I didn't heal it right away.
Yeah. Wow. It's huge. It's huge. And it's so refreshing to witness this journey of yours and hear you share all of these incredible insights, which have helped you so much, but is also great, such great wisdom to have other be thought provoking for other people. And we've all been through different situations, some more traumatic, some less traumatic, different, more difficult, less
Mhm.
difficult, but everybody's been through different things. And you're right, everybody does talk about healing things and the importance of healing things. And maybe it gets healed, not like from, like in your situation, I suppose, tell me if I'm not interpreting this right, but from my understanding of what you've shared, you didn't necessarily heal it. You just took the qualities, it just made you who you were as the personality qualities that you had, which were able to give love, which then were able to take you on the journey, which put him behind bars and, working with that detective to, have that care and hold someone accountable. And taking that action was actually your healing.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like you had to sit through all this um, specific healing to do it. It was actually just
Right,
living life and being
right, right.
yourself and being your character, however that character developed over the course of your life,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
then be true to that character, not push it away, and then have a time of recognition where you went, yes, I can be loving, yes, I can be caring, because that is who I am as a person. But right now, because of what happened to me as a child, I'm going to now take stand and make someone accountable to.
Mhm.
And then your healing just took its natural progression.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a lot of great wisdom in that for so many. And
Mhm.
obviously me hearing that, there's lots of things I can probably take away from that as well. So yeah, thank you for those really good insights. And it's incredible, when you really go through the layers and sort of break it down, there is so much in there. Yeah.
Yeah, now if I could just write all that down.
That's why it's recording. You'll listen to the recording and then you can take notes.
There you go. There you go. You
Yeah.
know what I loved so much going through the process of the book, writing the book with Charles Graeber. Um, after all of these years that we've been working together on really understanding Charlie Cullen, understanding my own journey. Um, he has been one of the people that has been able to put my feelings to words, and I'm so grateful for that. I think everyone should have a writer just like following them around just narrating. But Charles Graeber, he's definitely a brilliant writer, and I'm so grateful for him delving into the emotions of who Charlie Cullen was and the emotions of our relationship and how they ended up being able to bring that to the screen. It was a really cool process.
Have you had any contact with Charlie since he's been locked up?
I saw Charlie in prison a couple dozen times before the book came out. He did not know that I was a confidential informant until the book came out.
Oh, wow.
So once that happened, everything changed. And so he has not answered my letters. And that's okay. That's all right. Um, I didn't get the answers I wanted anyway. I wanted those answers too. I really wanted to figure out who he really was, and I didn't get the answers.
Mm. Do you feel like one day, is he behind bars forever or is he coming out?
Oh, he's serving like 400 years or something like that. It's like,
Right.
yeah. Um, so Charlie Cullen, what I have finally understood through all of this is that he wore a mask, and that mask was being my friend. I think he genuinely cared about me and the way that he could care about me. Most of that was performative. And I think who Charles Cullen really is the murderer. And my friend Charlie is someone he pretended to be. That was a hard lesson. And watching him in the courtroom when the victims' families confronted him, he had an opportunity to say that he was sorry. He had an opportunity to take responsibility. And instead, this egomaniacal, just angry human was sitting there and refused to even make eye contact with these people. He wasn't a mercy killer. I wanted him to be a mercy killer. He was not. He enjoyed murdering. He murdered hundreds of people over the course of 16 years. And he did it in a way that was unmerciful and terrorizing and torturous. And he didn't take responsibility for that. That is a very, very challenging person who stated in a performative confession that he wanted to help people cross over, that he couldn't see them in pain. That was just a lie. It was a lie. I don't think that my friend Charlie ever actually existed. I think that there may have been a piece of him when he was young, but the friend I thought I knew, I don't think he existed.
Hard. Was there any part where you look back then and do you put it like you trusted him, you were blindsided?
Yeah.
And did you go through a journey with that blindside that sabotaged yourself and your own ability to have discretion and see people through their mask? Or did you just see him as this masterful mask wearer?
I was quite delusional in my belief that because I was groomed very early on by a monster. I thought I could see monsters. I thought I would know a monster. I thought that I had some type of a superpower, that the only way that I could move through life was to hold on to that belief that I would see another one coming. And Charles Cullen allowed me to let that belief go. I think it was the only way that I could feel safe in life, was to have that delusion for many years. And what I realized through Charlie is that I didn't need it. I see only the light in people. I see only the part of people that shines in a way that we are all connected, all of us. And that's my superpower. It's not seeing monsters, it's seeing the light in people. And Charlie taught me that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yes. What a story. What a story. Unbelievable. Thank you so much for sharing all of that And it's such a beautiful spot to actually end on, even though I wanted to ask you one more thing. I'll ask you anyway, and maybe we'll cut it or we won't. Did you quit nursing straight from there? And did the misalignment with the hospital, like the toxic lack of accountability of an institution, impact your decision to leave nursing?
I did not leave right away because I couldn't afford to. Yep. I needed my health insurance. It was the only way that I knew how to make money. I did leave nursing after a while because I realized that I could not be in alignment in that environment. When I left, I got myself in alignment, and I was able to go back and help other nurses stay in alignment, and not in a punitive way, in a way that I could mentor them. I could show them that we could be loving in ways that I think we started to lose in healthcare. And I think that all of us in healthcare understand that it is broken. It's very, very broken.
All over the world.
Yeah, it's very, very broken. But there are wonderful nurses. There's wonderful people in healthcare, and absolutely. I'm so grateful for them. But we've got a long way to go.
I mean, it's not the people. We've got wonderful people working in a broken system that's been oppressive for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which is a whole nother conversation.
I know. That's like years of conversation.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Amy. It's been so wonderful to really break this down, have you share the story, the suspense, and the fascination of this story. You know, everybody likes a fascinating story. And like you said, you know, it's cool to say, you know, you put a serial killer behind bars, you know, it is cool. What a legacy. But, you know, there's so much beyond that. And we've been able to really talk about some of those things within this conversation and really pull back the layers and see how many gold nuggets there really are in the learning and the growth of individuals from what you went through in your process. And that is the power of storytelling and the power of sharing. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I loved this.
Oh, good. Thank you. So if people want to learn more about, I know, you know, you're doing a lot of more spiritual healing modalities now. And if people want to connect with you and learn a little bit more about what you're doing now, or even just read your blogs or read your book or something like that, where can they find you?
Well, I can tell you that probably the best thing to do is follow me on Instagram. I have decided to just really show my journey and just be very wide open on Instagram. I'm Amy the GoodNurse on Instagram. I do have a website, and I really only do workshops, and I do private workshops. I don't really do a lot of one-on-one. I will do one-on-one, but I find for me, I can't seem to do things over Zoom. So if you want to fly to wherever I am in the world, I'm happy to work one-on-one, but I'm not one of those practitioners that can do it over Zoom.
Yeah.
So quantum healing for me has to be kind of one-on-one together.
Yeah.
Physically.
Yes. But, you know, just reading Amy's book or just following her journey is really, and as you can see from this conversation, she has a lot of great insights that you may be able to be inspired by and take your own inspired action in your own lives. So yeah, definitely follow Amy's Instagram handle. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and consider subscribing to the Wellthy Living podcast on iTunes and on YouTube. To find out a little bit more about my services, you can connect with me through my social media channels or through the Wellthy Living website. So www.ellthy, then living.com.au. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.